Hi y'all, this is Grace from Grace Ann Studio. Today we're going to be creating some watercolor lettering with the Tombow dual brush pens and the Tombow water brush pens. Now if you haven't used the Tombow water brush pens yet, they are basically a paintbrush with a barrel on the bottom that comes off, and you can fill that barrel with water. And then as you are lettering or painting or illustrating, you basically gently squeeze the barrel a little bit, and then water is going to come out the tip and continuously wet your bristles, allowing you to create beautiful watercolors using your dual brush pens. So let's get started. Now just with any project, the first thing that you should always do is test your materials. Here I have some watercolor paper, and I tested out swatches of colors for 2 different 10 packs. I used the Bohemian 10 pack and also the Bright 10 pack. We'll go with the Bohemian. Just make sure that whenever you're choosing colors for watercolor lettering, you're going to keep in mind that as you add water to your dual brush pens, the color is going to become a little bit more diluted, and it won't be quite as bold as it is when you're coloring just with straight dual brush pens. To create watercolor lettering using the Tombow dual brush pens, the easiest way is going to be to use either the product packaging that your 10 pack came in or the blending palette that Tombow also carries. And you use those basically as a palette to create watercolors out of your Tombow dual brush pens. Today I'm going to be using the product packaging that my Bohemian 10 pack came in, and I'm going to take the insert out. You don't have to do that, but I just really want you to see what the watercolor looks like when we create it. So to create watercolors using the dual brush pens, all you have to do is just scribble a little bit of color onto the product packaging or the blending palette. I just colored number 346. And let's just go ahead and start with that. We'll start with some monochromatic lettering. And then you use your water brush to squeeze a few drops of water onto the ink. And as you mix it, the color is diluted and it creates a lovely little watercolor. From there, it's just regular lettering. You're just using a brush with a more flexible tip, but you would still start with your upstroke and then transition to a nice downstroke. And every time you are creating these letters, a little bit more of that ink is coming off, and you want to make sure that you're leaving enough water that it's going to create bleeds and the letters are going to blend. So with every time you come in with that downstroke and you hit the exit stroke from the previous letter, you can see if you have enough water on there that it's going to create really nice blends at all those connections. So at this point, my water brush is getting a little bit dry, so you can either gently squeeze the barrel to get a little bit more water out and go over that one again, or you can dip your water brush into a glass of water or a dish of water and add some clean water. So since I do have a little bit of ink on my brush, I'm going to go ahead and use a glass of water and just dip just to get a little bit of the ink off. And then I'll come back in with my next letter. And again, I'm still squeezing water out from the water brush because that's really going to give you the nicest bleeds. And if you do need to exaggerate a bleed, you can always kind of dab the brush at that transition. But you want to make sure that you're keeping a wet edge, because that's going to be how you get the best bleeds between your letters and the connections. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Start and just keep writing and add clean water until your ink basically runs out, or you can vary it a little bit. And again, start with your full color. Make sure that you're getting enough water down so that it's puddling up a little bit, but it's not going to overtake anything that you may add on. So I'm going to start the same way and just start to let my color run out a little bit. extend my exit stroke. I'm just squeezing my water brush. So on this one, this is actually a good example of too much water. And to fix that, I'm going to kind of try to push some of it back into the H. But you'll see what happens when I add just clean water to my L. So all of this color from the E really rushes in and takes over that L. So figuring out what the exact right amount of water to create really nice watercolor lettering, it's really just going to take practice. This is too much, and this up here was maybe not quite enough. So that happy medium is what we're looking for. Now, instead of continuing to just let it run out, I'm going to pick up the full color with every third letter. That way you get a nice little variation. Again, I'm squeezing water out again. And every time you squeeze water, of course, it's going to dilute that a little bit more. I tend to prefer the second option just because I think it gives a little bit more, as I said, variation. But there's no wrong way to do it, just however you want it to work for the project you're working on. So now let's take a look at creating watercolor lettering with multiple colors, because let's be honest, getting those colors to blend together and create beautiful bleeds is most of the fun of watercolor lettering. So first, I'm going to start by creating a few more colors of watercolor. This is color 026, 685, and 528. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind when you are coloring or watercoloring with multiple colors is the way that the colors are going to mix and the colors you're going to create. So keep that in mind when you are when you're choosing the order for how to apply colors. So for example, I'm probably not going to put my purple and my yellow together. If I did, it probably wouldn't be too horrible because this purple has quite a bit of red in it. So just keep that in mind as you're applying colors as well. I am actually choosing to rinse my brush between each of these colors because I don't want any of the colors to mix at this point. You could, of course, always mix and create all of your own watercolor lettering or all of your own colors, which is totally fine and half the fun of using these water-based pens. But I really like the pure colors that came in the 10-pack, so I'm just going to use those. All right, so to start, make sure that your water brush is nice and wet, just like always. So you can either do that by squeezing the barrel or by dipping it in some nearby water. And I'm going to start this time with blue. So I'll have one letter be blue. And you can see I'm just dabbing to add a little bit more water, trying to extend my exit stroke up, because that exit stroke, that's where the bleeds are going to happen. And again, I'm rinsing my brush here instead of just going to the next color, because I like for my colors to be pretty pure. Next, I'm going to choose yellow. So I'm not starting right with that next stroke, but I am going to go over the exit stroke from the previous color because I do want those colors to bleed together. Squeezing my water brush out a little bit here to get a little bit more color and a little bit more water. Oops. That's probably a little bit too much. So you can see I put one too many drops on there and that color is already just pushing all the way back into the H. So to try to save it, I'm going to pull a little bit out, not too much. And then come back and dab over it. This is a good trial and error tutorial too. Okay, next I'm going to go with my green. And you can see, as you recall, there's a lot of water on that E. So as I come around with my green, you'll see what happens. So see how all of that water is just creating a nice little avenue for the color to be pulled either one direction or the other. And that's mostly going to depend on the flow of the water, if that makes any sense, and how much pigment is in each color. So you'll see different colors doing different things. All right, so next we are going to go green to purple, purpley pink. And we'll see what these colors turn out like. Actually, I kind of like that combination, but you can see when I hit it and I hit that with the wet edge from the previous L, that color just beautifully blended into that L without any help from me. I am, however, going to come in and add a little bit more water to the end of this L because my brush was a little bit dry at that point. All right, and then we'll end again with our blue. So again, starting our downstroke, and it's hitting that exit stroke. And if you just make sure that the water is pooling on the page for a minute, but not so much that it's puddling like it was on the E, you just get these really, really lovely blends and bleeds that just come to life on their own. Now that we've gone through creating watercolor calligraphy using the medium brush, which it would work the same with the small water brush, it would just obviously the size would be smaller. Let's go through creating a print watercolor or true watercolor lettering using the flat brush. The technique is going to be the same, except obviously the flat brush is flat, so we'll be creating print lettering with this as opposed to calligraphy. The first thing I'm going to do is add a little bit more color to my palette, and to do that you just scribble a little bit more color down. Try not to get your markers in the water though. So when I need to, I'll just go through and dilute that here in a second, the same way. I'm going to start with my purple this time instead of green. So adding a few drops of water. So to create the watercolor lettering, you would just use the flat brush and hold it down. And in the same way, you want to make sure that the water is standing, it's sitting on top of the page a little bit, but not so much that it's really creating a puddle. So when I'm doing watercolor lettering, true lettering that's, print like this, I like to work a different color for each stroke rather than each letter. I just think that makes it a little bit more interesting and cohesive as a piece, but I'll show you another option for this here in just a second. So I know I said earlier not to do the yellow and the purple, but I just want to see what color is going to happen. So we're just going to find out together. So because there's a little bit more pink in this purple, or a little bit more red, it turned my nice gold a little bit more brown rather than just kind of murky. So I think it was okay. Not my total favorite, but it'll work. Next, I'm adding some water to the green. Okay, so that was just the letter I. Let's just write the word love next. So at this point, I'm going to switch techniques, and I'm going to use one color per letter, because the next way to create bleeds with print lettering is to have your letters touch. So we'll have green, use a little blue, and to do that, obviously, you want to keep your water brush upright and flat so that it's the same all the way around. This is if you're using a nice serif, sans serif lettering. And then you just make sure that you're hitting that wet edge on the previous letter. It doesn't have to overlap quite that much, but as long as there's a slight overlap, you'll still get those nice bleeds. So here I'm only going to do just a tiny one. You can see on my V I had quite a bit of water on there, so it really just gushed into that E. I'm trying to be very careful about how I'm allowing that bleed to take over my E. So let's finish up with our last word. It's going to be exactly the same process as we used for the previous two. Each letter is going to have a different stroke, or each stroke will have a different color, rather. And what's fun about this is you can, of course, mix styles as well. So you could use, actually let's switch to the small brush. Since we've seen the medium and the flat water brush, we'll switch to the small so you can see that one. You can see once you've worked out that perfect amount of water, that those bleeds really just happen naturally and on their own. And there you have it, watercolor lettering with the Tombow dual brush pens and the water brushes. Thank you guys so much for following along today. I really hope that you enjoyed learning all about watercolor lettering with the Tombow dual brush pens and the Tombow water brush. If you give it a try, be sure to tag at Tombow USA and at Grace Ann Studio on social media so we can cheer you on. Thanks and have a great day.